Do you ever have a game that just consumes you? The kind of game you find yourself playing over and over and over again. And not like one of those live service games like Master Duel or whatever gacha game is popular like Genshin or Honkai, but just a regular game. It doesn't happen with me often. I think the last time a game truly grabbed me by the balls like that was Elden Ring. So I was really surprised when Kelipot managed to do the same. It was a game I had my eyes on for a while, but I was waiting for it to go on sale. Not only would it cost less money, but Steam says it has no official English translation, so if it was unreadable, I could just return it. Not only was Steam kind of lying to me, but it also has an in-game fan translation that's more complete than the official one. I booted up the game and was introduced to two young princes of the Kingdom of Celephis, the older brother Cain and the younger brother Abel, who are currently looking for a way to stop a plague. They travel to the center of their kingdom to the top of the Cloud Spire, where Cain suddenly disappears. Abel, helped by a merchant named Will, manages to find his brother at the top of the tower, where they're suddenly attacked by Cain himself. Abel wouldn't have been able to survive if not for Will's help, but even after winning, Cain escapes through a crack in the world which quickly consumes the both of them. They're brought to a desolate wasteland beyond time and space, but luckily there is a way back out to Celephis, but not the Celephis they know. This one is utterly drowned in mud, and Abel's teacher Elias seems to have entirely lost his mind. Lost it to the point where he even kills Abel, but that's not the end of the journey, because Abel is brought back to the wasteland like nothing ever happened. And the gate to the mud-drenched Celephis is still open, letting Abel begin his journey anew. While you like and subscribe, let me explain that the reason why I started with the story first is that it intertwines with the gameplay. Kind of like Dark Souls, justifying things like why you can respawn and why you lose your stuff. And it is an important reason because Kelipot is an action roguelike where you start with nothing, slowly collecting items to grow in strength before you hit a wall and die. In terms of gameplay, it's honestly really similar to Hollow Knight, but only in terms of general feel. Like, both games don't have any momentum. When you take your finger off the analog stick, Abel will come to a complete and total stop. You also have a basic sword attack, which is for enemies in front of you, and instead of a pogo jump, you have a ground slam, so it's kind of like Dead Cells in that regard. Distinctly, you are invincible on the descent, but you can still take a hit if the attack doesn't kill any enemies because the game does have contact damage. The game even has a dash that makes you invincible to attacks like you're wearing the Shade Cloak. The only thing it's really missing is a way to attack above you, but I can see why it's not in the game. Most enemies aggro onto you once you reach the same Y coordinate as them, meaning if you're able to attack from below, they just won't fight back. For that reason, some of the best secondary items in the game are those that let you attack above you. I haven't explained what secondary items are. Secondary items can be bought at Will's shop or found in treasure chests in the level. They act as a way to spice up the game and give some variety to the way you play because every secondary weapon works very differently. The only thing they have in common is that they use that meter below your health bar, but every secondary weapon consumes different amounts. For example, let's look at this one. It's a fan that creates 3 large vines when you use it, and it's honestly one of the better ones. It goes through walls and even hits above you, but notice that they show up in a V-shaped pattern. This means it's very possible to miss your target, so you have to position yourself carefully. And if you're really good at it, you can even position yourself so enemies are right where 2 vines meet to get double the damage on a single cast. Then you have your ultimate attack, which uses the same meter as your secondary but must be full before use. They're based on the major Tarot Arcana, and while I did call them ultimate attacks, they aren't always actually attacks because each one does a different thing. You always start with the Fool, which creates a bubble around you that absorbs projectiles, but you can always get something like the Tower, which places a barrier down. To be frank, I'm mostly just stuck with the Fool because the ability to destroy projectiles comes in handy so often. So often. The variety of items you get really do make each run special, where you're forced to cobble together whatever you can in the early game. One of the best examples is this gun right here. It takes a while to spool up, but when it fires, it unleashes a large shot that destroys enemy bullets. With a bit of clever timing, you can tear your way through a lot of difficult fights with the right setup. Given how your default weapon is a sword, a lot of the secondary weapons are projectiles that help even the odds. Of course, there's plenty of generic items that you can gather in abundance, which give you passive abilities. This could be stuff like the Aberrant Cone, which makes a little ghost follower that shoots out bullets. Or it could be the Bloodthirster, which has a chance of dropping health whenever you kill an enemy with your sword. To be honest, I think it's these tertiary items that are even more important than your secondary weapon. You don't have any sort of inventory limit, so you can just stack them all together in ways that are honestly absurd. However, this game is still a roguelike, and just like its namesake, all your progress will be set back to 0 when you return to the wasteland. But not actually all your progress, because you do get to keep 2 things. The first of which is Soul Essence. It's that blue stuff enemies drop when they die. Pretty quickly, you'll unlock Kwong, who can help by using that Soul Essence to empower Soul Gems. No, not the things from Skyrim. Can't believe I re-downloaded Skyrim just for this one joke. This is gonna sound stupid, but do you know how long it takes to actually find a Soul Gem? Like 20 minutes, and it's annoying. My beef with Todd Howard aside, Soul Gems and Kelipot are things dropped by enemies just like Soul Essence, and they contain the power of said monster. These can be passive, secondary attacks, or even ultimates, which really spice up the game beyond what you can buy from Will or find lying around the level. As I mentioned before, you can upgrade your Soul Gems. This not only means enhancing their abilities, like getting 3 spheres instead of 1, but also increasing their drop rate, increasing the odds of getting your build together. The game even has a bestiary that outlines what enemies drop what and what their Soul Gems do when leveled up, so you can save on Soul Essence. It's a nice quality of life feature that goes a long way. And speaking of quality of life features, you can reset the entire thing in case you want to spend Soul Essence on something else. Though it is a bit of a double-edged sword because you can't reset one Soul Gem, you reset all the Soul Gems. I have like 10 minutes of footage of me simply filling these back in because I am an idiot who accidentally reset it. The second kind of permanent upgrade the game gives you are runes. You can only activate 1 at a time, but any unlocked rune will always give you a passive bonus. They're a nice way to get some permanent strength while also tailoring it to your build due to the choices. Like, do you want to be able to Goomba Stomp every enemy, or do you want your health to be refilled after every boss? And they bring me nicely to my next point, because runes are often obtained in one of 2 ways. Usually, you find runes within the levels themselves, but sometimes they are the reward for side quests. Before venturing into any world, you're allowed to accept up to 3 side quests. These are benign tasks that will help keep you busy as you adventure, and the rewards are honestly not that good. You can get things you can sell to Will for money or refills of your health potion, but to be honest, I always forgot. I didn't use them at all, and I beat the game just fine. And speaking of the levels, my favorite thing about them is that you're given freedom in how you want to do them. You see, the world select kind of functions like Demon Souls or Mega Man, where you're presented with a world to enter, and then you can enter any of the levels within. In total, there are 5 levels for able to explore, and a thing that impressed me about Kelipot is that while each level is randomly generated, they still manage to feel very different. Like, the Forest of Ruins level is a left-to-right path, but the branching segments tend to go deep down for the caves, as opposed to the DSCs of Ophanim, where the branching segments go up. In the laboratory, the subterranean Rosalia is labyrinthian, seemingly going off in random offshoots and directions, and the Cloud Spire barely has any left or right as you go up and up and up. It's not just the hazards or the enemies, but the way the levels are generated that help them feel distinct. And with each world you beat, you unlock a new level, giving Kelipot a good sense of progression. Because it's not just a new level, it's new enemies, which means new soul gems to be upgraded and collected. The further you go, the more options you unlock and the more builds become available. I'm not actually too keen on roguelikes as a genre because progression does tend to get kind of stale. Like using Hades as an example, yes, I'm using Hades as a negative example, sue me. As you go through Hades, the gameplay loop can get pretty stale where not enough new things are introduced to keep the player engaged. Like, you pretty much always get a battle with the Bone Snake and Thesis and the Minotaur, and there's not much you can do about it. Personally, it's why I felt that the first area of Hades was probably the best of the whole set, because you can fight 3 very different bosses at the end of it. Kelipot goes far out of its way to keep itself from feeling stale as you go through each world. Not only is your journey pushed further with each world, but you're able to select where you start, alleviating some of the boredom by giving you additional freedom. But the levels you've already done get something added to them to spice them up, pushing you a bit further and keeping you on your toes. First, things will be normal, and then you'll find enemies that revive themselves, needing to be killed twice, and that's on top of their second life powering them up. Or you could run into these priests that power up nearby enemies. Or maybe you'll find enemies produced by these glyphs which will appear in every world regardless. There's this stacking challenge as the levels you know begin to change and you're asked to master them. The game even does the same thing for the bosses, keeping them from feeling stale as you progress through each world. The bosses are only the same on the surface because they change in some slight and some radical ways. At the least, it's adding projectiles, at the most, it's entirely new phases. The bullet hell influences will be light at first, but they'll quickly become super clear once you get further into it. And the boss fights themselves are a highlight of the experience. Kelipot has 5 major bosses that reappear throughout each of the levels. You'll start with Elias, who has a good variety of attacks. Some are linear and some cover huge areas before he switches up how you're supposed to fight him, becoming one of those stationary bosses before ending in a death-defying climb. It makes him a good first challenge since you not only need to master basic combat in his first phase but then movement as the fight progresses. The next fight is Carter, who's all gas and no brakes in the best way. He gives you little room to breathe and even attacks you from a distance, forcing you to not just understand the combat but get really good at it. And the fight just gets more intense and complicated the further in you get when you're not just dodging Carter but all the bullets he spawns. Ophelia is third, and she brings the bullet hell influences to the forefront and is about mastering movement rather than combat as the screen is flooded in chaos. She's the boss I struggled with the most, really requiring me to get good, as they say. I learned that damage is king and that you really can't let her more troublesome phases last too long if you want to live. Next is Casimir, who clearly believes variety is the spice of life. While he isn't as fast as Carter or as chaotic as Ophelia, he'll constantly switch weapons from a sword to spinning blades and even force you to chase him down. As for the final boss, I'm gonna blue ball you. If you want to know more about that, play the game for yourself. It's worth noting that these bosses also drop their own soul gems, which are a lot like boss weapons, letting you snag an ability the bosses themselves used. And then there's also mini bosses spread throughout the levels who have a chance of spawning. The base drop rate for their soul gems, while not 100%, is higher than normal from my experience, so risking a fight with a mini boss can be pretty rewarding if you want their soul gems. And yet, none of that is my favorite feature of Kelipot. It's this thing right here, the option for Abel to retell Will the story of how he beat a boss. Just like how this game has a reason for you to respawn, this serves as the game's explanation for how Abel is free to practice against bosses. It's a great feature, letting you pick your tools and stuff before a practice run to see how well different things work in different scenarios. The sheer freedom this game gives you when practicing also avoids the worst part of roguelikes. Moments where you get right up to the final boss only to have a 40-minute run promptly end at the last second. In Kelipot, you're just allowed to practice as much as you want until you're confident you can do it on an actual run. And the game has tons of quality of life features that seriously make it such a smooth experience. Ever put a game back down only to realize you have no idea what's happening when you pick it back up? Well, Kelipot has a summary feature. You can even redo worlds and re-experience the cutscenes if you feel like it. It's a feature so good, I used it to get footage for this video. And I really do think this summary feature is important because while the gameplay is good, Kelipot is a lot like Hades, where one of the main draws of this game is its stellar character writing. Will and Abel have these little conversations in the wasteland that really flesh out who these characters are. You'll hear Abel talk about his relationship with his brother, how despite being the younger one, he was always better than Cain. Or Will, when he finds out the guy he's been helping along is actually a prince. The game has a wonderful sense of humor that just makes these characters feel like lovable friends. One of my favorite conversations has to do with the revive mechanic and how one of the enemies in the forest are ghosts. It even has a Shadows Die Twice reference at the end of it, and I'm not joking, here it is. But there's more to this game's writing than just Abel and Will. One part are the side character NPCs that those side quests are about. Across the many worlds, you'll come across a variety of colorful characters like a snake whose gifts you have to pass to his crush, or Mice, the playwright who's currently using you as inspiration. These were the real reasons I ended up doing those side quests, because I was dying to know what else these characters had to say. And then there's the writing behind the bosses. Towards the end of the game, they'll join you in the wasteland, and just like Abel and Will, they have their own conversations too. Sometimes the conversations aren't even about Abel and just between two of the bosses. And these conversations can be just as comedic as the ones Abel has with Will, but more importantly, they elaborate on the lore of this game. If anything, that's the part that impressed me most about the writing, the way every bit of it fits together so nicely. It often seems like the smallest detail actually has a reason, like how Ophelia can summon so many bullets during our fight gets an entire conversation. And that giant hand that was tossing Casimir items during his boss fight gets explained too. It feeds into one of the best feelings as you reach those epiphanies and suddenly the entire game makes so much more sense. It gives you a great reason to actually do the post-game content. Oh yeah, did I mention that Kelipot has a post-game and a pretty big one? You unlock a bonus world that's not only the hardest, but also gives you extra soul essence for upgrading your soul gems, but new drops which are used to upgrade the wasteland. Not only do they have special effects making runs easier, but you also get extra conversations when you upgrade them. And then there's the extra content, like the time attack which asks you to beat bosses quickly, and the boss rush which asks you to beat them all. I know this review has been light on criticisms, but that's because I genuinely don't have much of any. This game looks good and it plays good. From the wonderful music to the hand-drawn visuals, Kelipot is a gem of an experience. My only complaint is that you have to switch it to English fan translation, which is mostly complete but still has a few missing spots. You know, I probably should have put the point that you want to put it to English fan translation earlier in the review, but I've already made my bed. Kelipot, as one of those games that utterly blindsided me with how good it is, deserves an easy 10 out of 10. You have got to try it for yourself. It should be on sale for the Steam Summer Sale at the time this video goes up. Now that we've got the video done, let's get to doing our Patreon shoutouts. For our 3 stars, we have special thanks to Choron, SkyKing64, 87 Werehog, Garen Lefay, Zora Chow, and Marvonla. For 4 stars, we have Miko, The Dead Dance Party. And for our super duper special 5-star shoutouts, we have first, Vanilla Flower, The Secret Experiment. Second, Spidey Zack, The Unfathomable. Then, The Good Old Days, The Respite. Followed by Hodari Lion, The Unending End. Thank you for watching. Do be sure to like and subscribe. As always, this is Rose Fury signing out.